Alright, welcome back to the channel. My name is Piyush. This is day 5 in 30 days of AWS Terraform. Make sure you watch the previous videos because it has some prerequisites and we are just following along. It's a playlist. Do not start the playlist in between from somewhere. Make sure you start it from the beginning. Also, make sure you watch day 0 video in which I have explained the details of the challenge, how to do the submissions, how to complete the task, and the details about the GitHub repository and everything. You can find the link in the description as well. In this video, we'll be talking about variables in AWS and Terraform. Like, how does it work? So, for that, let's have a look at this diagram. Okay. So there are different type of variables. So based on purpose, that means how do we categorize these variables together in Terraform, plus based on values, right? So don't worry, like it will be a little overwhelming if you are using the Terraform for the first time, but I will explain everything. We'll do hands-on for everything, so don't worry about it. Don't stress it too much as of now. Okay, so just understand. Let's take a step back. Okay, let's understand what is a variable and why do we need it in Terraform or in any programming language, right? So let's start with the basic question. So why we need variables in the first place? Okay, so whenever you have to use certain values again and again in a file, in a program, or in a script, then you have to type the value again and again, right? So let me show you this example. um, this is the day 4 main.tf that we did earlier, right? So in that you see there are different values. We only created an s3 bucket, so we have a s3 bucket name, which is this one over here, right? And then it has tags, which is environment. So let's say this file, instead of having just one resource, because in the actual environment you won't be having just one s3 bucket, you will have hundreds and thousands of resources, right? So let's say you have created another resource. Let's say you have created a VPC. So don't worry about it, like how it is created, all that difference. I'll explain it later, but now we are just focusing on variables, right? So let's just create a VPC, AWS VPC. Let's give it a name, sample. Okay, let's add a CIDR block and let's give it tags. Tags are important. Okay, so now I want to use the same tag again because it's for a dev environment. So let's use the same tag, which is environment equal to dev. Okay, and there is a name tag for the VPC, and it should be like, I want the tag should be environment name, which is dev hyphen the name of the resource, which is VPC, or the other way around. Okay, so that's one thing. Let's create another resource, which is resource, and let's create an EC2 instance now. Okay, AWS EC2. Now let's use the predefined fields and a tag. Tag, let's use environment dev and name equal to dev hyphen EC2 instance. Now, if you see what we have done over here, just zoom out a little bit. So what we are doing over here, we are using this particular field environment equal to dev over here in S3 bucket. Same thing over here in AWS VPC, and same thing over here in EC2 instance. There could be hundreds of more resources which will have the same tag, and we have to initialize it again and again with the same value. Now I could make some mistake as well, like over here instead of dev I could write staging or something else, and then it will make our Terraform files inconsistent because this was supposed to be a dev and this was just a human error, right? Plus I have to do it again and again. What if I want to make the changes in the Terraform file, right? Because when we are using this file, we'll be using it for multiple environments. So if I have to make it from dev to stage, I have to do it in every single resource, right? Stage over here, stage over here, okay, and stage in the third one as well. So it's a lot of work, right? And plus it's not efficient use of any coding or any scripting language. So instead what we do, let me first change it back to dev, and let's change it back to dev. Where else was it? Okay, let's keep it. Okay. So what we do instead of making the changes to all the places, what we'll do is we'll create a variable. So let's create a variable over here. It starts with variable, and let's give it the syntax is same, right? You start with the keyword variable and then the name of a variable name, which is that this is the local name, this is not the actual name. Okay, so let's call it env. Okay, and then default equal to dev. This is how we have initialized the value. Default equal to dev, type equal to string. So we'll come back to this type later on, but for now just focus on this thing. Okay, so variable name is env, the local name of the variable is env, but the actual value of the variable is dev. So we'll access this variable with var.env, or just give it another name because this could sound confusing. Env is a shell variable as well, so let's not use that. Variable environment default equal to dev and type equal to string. This is the optional field. You can just remove it for now or just follow along. Okay, so now instead of adding every hard-coded values over here and everywhere, what we can do is simply, instead of this, just replace it with var.environment. Okay, now it will have the value dev, because that's what the default value of the dev environment variable is. The same thing now over here, instead of dev, you can just add var.environment, and at the third place as well, which is over here, var.environment, right? It's simple. And now you might have understood the use case of it. Why do we use the variable and how to use it? First, you define the variable in the variable block. You define it, give it a value. Okay, even if you don't want to give the value, there are other options which we'll talk about in some time. But this is the simplest possible way of using a variable. You define it, give it a default value, set the type, and then you use that variable in your Terraform. How do you access that? var.environment, and this environment is nothing but the local name of the variable over here. You are not accessing it with var.dev because this value could change. We are accessing with the value over here. So that's how we access all the resources within Terraform, with the variable name, the local variable name. Okay, so I hope this is understood. So let's go back to this diagram now. Okay, so what we did, we created an input variable. That is an input variable which is taking the input from us. Okay, we are defining it and we are providing it a value that it can use in the entire Terraform workflow. So that's based on purpose. So based on purpose, we have three types: input, output, and locals. And then based on value, if you remember over there, we set type equal to string, meaning that's a string variable. String is in the form of letters, characters, words. You know, it could be multiple characters separated by a comma, everything like you write. Like if you write hello world, this is a string. If you just write hello, this is also a string. So we are just specifying the type as string. So that is based on the value. So based on the value, we have these many types. These are also called as type constraint. So based on value, we have primitive and complex. It's categorized into primitive and complex. So primitive is the simplest possible one, which does not have the complex data structure. So string, number, bool. Bool is boolean, right? It returns either true or false. We'll look at the example as well. And then we have complex, which is list, set, map, object, and tuple. Then we have special type, which is null. Null means you are not defining any data type for the variable. It's null. And then you have any, meaning if you don't define the type, like in this over here, if I just don't mention the type, if I remove this part over here, type equal to string, then it will take it as any. It's a valid type, it's a special type in which it will auto select the variable type based on the value that we have provided. Okay, so that's any. Now that was, we covered input variable. Now there are output and locals. Okay, so let's come to locals first. What is local and why do we need it? So locals, if you see over here, let's say the tags that you have used, okay, instead of my bucket, let's change it to something else. Let's change it to so that we can make it consistent with the other things, right? So let's change it to, like, how do we use it over here? Environment name and then the resource name. Okay, so let's do that over here as well. So dev-bucket. Okay, now what we want is, instead of mentioning dev over here, over here, first thing is we can use variable, right? And the other thing is we can also use local. So using variable over here is, first you need to create $, and this is how we create the variable. So you see dollar and dollar, after $, we have the curly braces. Why do we need that? Because earlier we were just accessing it with var.environment, because now it's string concatenation that we are doing, right? First we need to resolve the value of this variable and then add it to -bucket. You see over here? That's why we need to follow this syntax over here. And it's inside the double quotes so that it could resolve the value, what it is coming from. So if I just do, let's say, if I just do var.environment, it's not a valid syntax. It will not resolve the value. It is asking me to make the changes to this, right? But if I have to resolve the value of var.environment, what I need to do, we need to add dollar in front of it, then and close it in the curly braces like this. Okay, now we can do the same over here. Right. So name is this. So let's use this var environment -vpc and then var environment -ec2 instance. So that's one way. Okay. The other way of using it efficiently is define this value once and then use it later on. For example, we can have a type of variable which is locals. So the way we use it, locals. Okay. And then we define the value over here. So env equal to var.environment, or we can have the bucket name created like this. And then we can also have something for, let's say, for the VPC as well. We can just use it once over here. So VPC underscore name is equal to local.env. So instead of var.environment, now we are using it local.env. env we have defined it over here, or we can just use local.environment as well. Oh, actually it has to be var.environment because that's what we have used. We can remove this. Okay, and then we can use the same over here, var.environment. So what we have done now, instead of using this value, like tech tutorials with 𝗔𝗀 -bucket it was supposed to be, let's say, dev. Instead of using this value of bucket, what we have done, we have created a local in which we are creating this variable value. Okay, so we are using different sources, like you could add multiple other variables over here. So we are creating it like this, tech tutorials with 𝗔𝗀 bucket, or you can have another variable, let's call it variable channel. Okay, default equal to tech tutorials with 𝗔𝗀 channel name. Now over here as well, instead of this, you can just write dollar and then curly braces var.channel name. Okay, so now we have created a bucket name from the existing variables, or there are multiple other use cases of it, not just from the variables. We can take the value from any other resource, like its ID, name, and something else. So we'll do that later on, the complex example, but the simplest example is this one over here. So we have taken the value of channel name hyphen bucket hyphen environment. So this will become tech tutorials with Piyush hyphen bucket hyphen dev. And now when we have to use this bucket name over here, now instead of using this entire value, what we can simply do, we can do local dot bucket name, and that's it. Now it is simplified. Now whenever there is a reference of this bucket anywhere in this particular script or the entire configuration, we can just refer it with the local dot bucket name. And for here as well, now in the tag, let's use the same thing, right? Local dot bucket name, right? So that's one way of using locals. Now you can do the same for other things, like over here as well. You can, for the VPC, you can create a local VPC name equal to var.environment hyphen VPC. And over here, where is the VPC configuration, instead of this entire name, what you can simply do, local dot VPC name. Okay. And same thing you can do for others, right? And then there is, let's say, another configuration which is in bucket is global, but for, let's say, VPC, you specify region over here, right? So region, you have specified US East 1, and then you do that for your EC2 instance as well, right? Now instead of doing that, what you can do, you can create a variable over here. And the way we do, first we initialize the variable region, and then set a default value which is US East 1. You can give it a type, or you can just leave it blank for now. Okay, and now in the region as well, we use the same. We give region equal to var dot region. Okay, and over here as well, we can do var dot region. Okay, now the bucket name that we had, in that we can add another string to it, because the bucket name has to be unique, but make sure you are within the maximum allowed characters in the bucket name. And if it is allowed, if it is not that big, let's make it small. So let's call it TTWP. Now you see over here, now we are referencing bucket name at multiple places, but we can change it just by changing the variable value over here. We don't have to do it at multiple places, right? So now this will be reflected over here, and now this bucket name will become ttwp hyphen bucket hyphen dev, and then we can add another variable over here which is var dot region. For example, I'm not sure if the region like this will be, yeah, it should be supported, yeah. So that's what we can do. So that's variable and that's locals for you. So now let's do one thing. Oh, I made the changes in the same folder. That's okay. Okay, so let's do that. Let's run Terraform plan. I don't have to run Terraform in it because this configuration is already initialized in the local directory. So let's just run tf plan. It says invalid resource type AWS EC2 instance. AWS EC2 instance is not valid because it's not really a resource type. This is incorrect. So what we can do, let's go back, Terraform documentation. Let's search for AWS EC2. Let's search the exact resource type. And that's why I said in the beginning, like in the previous videos, you don't be fully dependent on LLM. I'm using GitHub Copilot, and it might have trained on the data by the previous provider version. So in the provider version, when there's a new version, they could change the name as well for the resource, right? And this is probably what would have happened over here. So let's find EC2 resource. There are so many resources that start with EC2 probably. So let's add one more thing. Okay, data source, VPC, it should be, no, it's not inside VPC, it's not inside transit. That's RDS, Outpost, EMR, ECR. Okay, it should be over here somewhere. Resources, okay. EC2. Is this EC2 host? No, that's a dedicated host. Let's search for just with EC2 and let's focus on EC2 resource only. Okay, over here, AWS EC2 host. No, we don't need this. EC2 instance state. No, EC2 AWS instance. Okay, so this is the right name. Okay, so let's go back and AWS instance. Okay, let's run tfplan again. It says AWS subnet.sample.id has not been declared because we have used this, but we have not created the subnet. So let's remove this. We don't need it for now. Okay, now it says 3 plan to add. What needs to add? It will show you the details over here. So it will be created, AWS VPC will be created, then an S3 bucket will be created over here, and then the third resource was AWS VPC will be created, which is, oh sorry, it's AWS instance will be created, which is an EC2 instance. Now what we can do is, we have seen locals and we have seen input variables. Now let's check output variables. What is output variable? Output variable, as the name suggests, provide output to a value, right? So if you go over here and write output, and the syntax is similar with the variable, so start with the keyword output. Let's give it a name. For example, let's say we want to check VPC ID once it is created. VPC ID is something that we have not provided over here, right? It's an auto generated value, or anything else like EC2 instance ID. So what we can do, if we want to know the value of it, or we need to pass that value to some other variable, to some other files, maybe use it later on, then we can create an output variable and it will be printed on the console once the resource is created. So let's give it a name. Let's call it VPC ID. Okay, and the way we get it is from the value is, the resource name was, resource type was AWS VPC, the resource name was sample, right? So AWS underscore VPC dot sample, and what we need, if you do a dot, it will show you all the available fields. You see over here, tags, if we need tags, region, everything over here, right? So let's say we just need the ID. So let's put ID over here. Okay, the same way, if we need instance ID, then you can use EC2 ID, and value is AWS instance.example.id. Okay, so this will show the value of it. So if I run tfplan again, it won't show it over here because these IDs are created after apply. But now this is showing the output variables. Earlier there were no output variables. Now we have added these two output variables, but we cannot see the value of it because they have not been created yet. These values are only populated once the resources are created. So if I run Terraform apply -- auto approve, okay, it will provision the resources and then it will show you the values. Okay, for now I'm getting some errors, so let's see. The image ID is invalid or does not exist because you know the reason, right? So let's use a different AMI. Let's go back over here, and in the AWS instance, let's see. Okay, let's take it from the example over here. or you can go to AWS documentation and find a valid AMI ID. Okay, let's run it again. So this type of error, it will not show you in TF plan because you will only get the instance ID or so AMID once you hit the actual API, right? And oh, I don't have the permission because the ID that I'm using, the IAM user, it only has S3 permissions, right? If you remember in the first or the second video when we have created the resource. So let's make those changes as well over here. Let's go to IAM. And the user that I was using, okay, just wait. Users, and that user was S3 create. So let's give it additional permissions, or maybe just add it to the group. Add users to the group. I have an admin group, so let's add it over here. And now it should have the permission. So let's go back and let's run it again. Okay, now it is creating VPC sample, it is creating instance. VPC has been created. This is the VPC ID, but this is just showing it over here. We need it in the output variable, right? So let's see how it will. Okay, it's done. Now you see over here EC2 ID, VPC ID. It is showing as the output variable, which we can reference to other modules and which we can refer to other Terraform scripts and which we can print as well if we want it. So what you can do now is you can also run Terraform output show, because now that we have cleared the screen, we don't know the output value and we just want to see the value of output variables without actually running the Terraform apply again. So what you can use, Terraform output show. It says output variable could not be found in Terraform state file. Am I doing something wrong? So let's run Terraform output --help. And these are the, maybe just Terraform output. Yeah, actually the show was for the state file, so my bad. So just Terraform output, if you run, it will show you the value of the output variables. Okay, so if you go to the GitHub repo over here in day 5, you will see a lot of examples. You will see a lot of tasks that you can complete by yourself, and then you can do the submission, right? So here are all the things that we have discussed. It could not be the same because I have created it on runtime, but this is what you can practice. So input variables, locals, and then output variables. Then it will provide you more details like how to initialize the variable, how to use the variable, provide value to it. Okay, so now the second part of this video is we have looked into these three, right? So there is based on value, which is type constant, which is covered in the next video or maybe the video after that. The next that I want to cover is, okay, this we have covered already, the variable syntax. Variable has a type and value, and then few other details, right? So these all are the optional field and we'll look at when we move forward. Right now, I don't want it to be a complex demo because we have just started. We are just on day 5. I want to take the things slow. That's why I'm not explaining the rest of the things. But let's move forward. Now, you see what we did. We declare the variable and then we initialize it with the default value. Okay. But where did we do that? We did that within the default itself, which is not mentioned over here. Okay. So let's go to Terraform variable precedence. Okay, and let's go to the variable block reference, the documentation. Okay, and then okay, so over here we have different ways using which we can initialize our variable, right? So what we have already done is using the default. Okay, so that's the first way. Okay, let me move it a bit. So that's first way in which inside the variable we have defined the default equal to this value. Then we have environment variable. So what we can do is So instead of having the value over here where the value of environment was, let's say, we have defined it somewhere over here, right? Environment equal to this. So what we can do is, instead of that, we can create an environment variable, the shell variable, export tf underscore var in the capital letters, and then environment equal to, let's say, stage. Once we do that, and when we run tf plan now, let's see what it does. Okay, it says some changes will be happening. What changes will be happening? One, to change. What is changed? The tags will be changed from dev to stage. The name will be changed from dev-pvc to stage pvc. So it will update the variable value from dev to stage. Now we already have it mentioned over here, default equal to dev. Then why it is taking the environment variable from the shell that we have defined, this one over here? It's because environment variable has the higher precedence than this. Okay, higher precedence meaning now this will have less weightage because we already have the values defined over here. It will take this value. This has the higher precedence. Okay, so this is what I have defined over here from low to high. This is having the lowest precedence. This is having the higher precedence than this one. Okay, so environment variable has higher precedence than the default one. Then we have another way, which is terraform.tf_vars. So instead of initializing it from here or inside the variable, what we can do is we can go over here and we can create another file and call it terraform.tf_vars. Once we do that, it will open a new file, and this is just a key value format. Key value format, we provide the name of the environment variable, let's say environment, and equal to value, which is dev and stage we have already used. So let's call it pre-prod. Okay. So now what we have done is we just created a new file and provided the value over here, key value pair. And now if I run Terraform plan again, now this will take the precedence over the other two. Let's see. So you see over here, now from dev it will become pre-prod. Now we have three different ways of initializing the variable value. And the third one is having the higher precedence than the other two. So now tf_var will have the higher precedence. Now this tf_var will be loaded automatically. You don't have to provide the value because this is the default format. Any file with the extension .tf_var will be auto loaded. Similarly, we have tf_vars.json, we have any string .auto.tf_vars. So these will be loaded automatically and these will have higher precedence to the previous ones. You can test it out. I have provided the sample in the GitHub repository as well. You can try it out. And then there is last option which has the highest precedence over everything. And this is with -var or -var file option. What it does is you go over here and let's say when you are running Terraform plan, you provide -var is equal to the name of the variable. Let's say environment is equal to prod. Once we do that, it take this as an environment variable to the command and it will try to make the changes. What changes it is making? Let's go back over here. And if you see, now the environment variable will be changed from dev to prod because this has the higher precedence, right? So we have used the variable value using multiple different techniques, right? We have used tf_vars, we have used in default, we have used an environment variable, and now we can also use with -var or -var file. -var file, how it works, you can just provide this in a different file other than tf_vars, and then you can just provide it over here like the way we are doing right now. Okay, so that's the variable precedence that I wanted to cover. Now, which is the preferred way, what you should be using, it totally depends on your use case. Like if it is not a sensitive value, you can use terraform.tf_vars, which is one of the standards. If it is something that you are passing on command and you don't want it to be entered in the tf-var files, then you can actually use either this option -var, because some, like let's say some password, some credentials that you are passing, or you can use an environment variable like using export. But again, this will be inserted in your shell history, bash history, right? So you use a third party secret management tool for that purpose, right? So which technique you use, it totally depends on your use case. You can also use the default one if it is something that you don't change really often. The benefits of the variable files, separate variable files, is whenever you need to make a change, you just need to make the change in that file and you don't have to touch any other file at all, right? It'll be easier to manage, it will be easier to track your changes, and that's why we do it. So this is the other way. So make sure you go through the GitHub repository, try it out, these demo samples that we have given over here, right? And it like it's everything that we have discussed, plus it has more examples that you can test it out by yourself. And yeah, tried out these commands as well, and at the end of the demo, don't forget to destroy the resources. So tf destroy --auto approve. All right, once you do that, your environment will be cleaned up and you will be ready for the next demo. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Let's catch up in the next one.